I thought I had everything. Love, happiness, a life I had dreamed of for so long. My husband, Rahul, and I had a love marriage. We had met during college, and our connection was instant. The chemistry, the shared dreams, the way we understood each other. It felt like destiny had brought us together. But everything changed the moment Rahul and his family found out about my wealth. At first, they were kind and supportive, as any new family should be. But slowly, I started to notice subtle changes. The invitations to dinners, the casual mentions of bills needing to be paid, the little requests that started to feel more like expectations. It was as if the love we had built was now overshadowed by my financial success. At first, I didn't mind helping out here and there. After all, I was married, and supporting my husband's family felt like part of the commitment. But it didn't stop. Each time they called, each time there was a bill to be paid, I was expected to cover it. It became a routine, one that gnawed at my confidence and self-worth. It was one evening that changed everything. Rahul and his family had gathered for a casual dinner, and as usual, I was asked to cover the bill. This time something inside me snapped. I refused. I was tired of being seen as nothing more than a source of financial support. The moment I said no, the room fell silent. Rahul's eyes, once filled with love, now seemed disappointed. His family's expressions turned cold, their eyes filled with entitlement. It was then that they snatched my wallet from the table, a clear sign of their anger and frustration. "You think you're too good for us now?" Rahul's mother sneered, her voice dripping with venom. I was stunned, my heart sinking as I realized how deep this went. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power, control, and disrespect. That night, I returned to our apartment, my mind racing with thoughts I had been too afraid to confront. I had been so focused on loving Rahul, on being the perfect wife, that I had lost sight of who I truly was. No one should feel obligated to sacrifice their identity and self-respect for the sake of others. And that's when I realized. It was time for a change. I couldn't allow myself to be taken for granted any longer. I had worked too hard to build the life I had, and no one, not even the man I loved, had the right to treat me like I was beneath them. I had to take control of my life, my choices, and my future. And so, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to ask for a divorce and claim what was rightfully mine, the share of the property I had worked for, the assets I had earned. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was one that was necessary for my self-respect and peace of mind. The moment I decided to stand up for myself, I knew I had already won. The days that followed were filled with tension. I could feel the weight of my decision settling on me, heavy and unsettling, but also liberating. Rahul didn't take kindly to my proposal. The moment I brought up the idea of divorce and claiming my rightful share of the property, his face turned pale. He tried to dismiss it at first, telling me that we could work things out, that he would talk to his family and make them understand. But I could see the cracks in his words. He wasn't apologizing for the way his family had treated me, or for the fact that I was constantly expected to pay their bills. He was only trying to keep me from leaving, from taking control of my life. His family reacted similarly. They tried to manipulate the situation, playing on my emotions, reminding me of the love we shared, the vows I had made. "You can't just throw everything away," his mother told me, her voice laced with faux concern. "We've always been there for you, haven't we?" But I knew better now. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They were only interested in maintaining the flow of money. They weren't asking for help anymore. They were demanding it, and I had given in too many times. It was never about love or partnership. It was about taking advantage of my success. I sat there, hearing their pleas, feeling the weight of the pressure. But this time I didn't falter. I didn't feel the guilt that used to consume me. Instead, I felt stronger, more resolute than ever. "I've been more than patient," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've tried to make this work, but you've taken advantage of my kindness for far too long. I've given everything, and I've lost myself in the process. I refuse to do that anymore." Rahul's face twisted with frustration. "So what do you want then? You'll leave me? After everything we've been through?" His voice cracked with emotion, but I wasn't swayed. "I don't want to leave you, Rahul. But I can't continue living like this. I deserve respect, not to be treated as a bank account." The tension in the room was unbearable, but I stood my ground. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally standing up for the woman I had always been deep down, strong, confident, and independent. I knew I was worth more than the way they had been treating me, and I wasn't afraid to walk away from a situation that didn't value me. The next few days were a blur of back-and-forth arguments and tearful pleas. Rahul, desperate to keep our marriage intact, begged me to reconsider. "I love you, Elena," he said, his voice shaky with emotion. "Please don't do this. I promise I'll make things right." But I wasn't listening to the promises anymore. Words were empty when actions spoke louder. He had promised to respect me, to treat me as an equal, and yet he had let his family take advantage of me time and time again. He had let me shoulder the financial burden, and he had done nothing to stop it. His love wasn't enough to erase the years of disrespect. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my dignity, my self-worth. I was no longer the woman who would hide her feelings, who would sacrifice her happiness for the sake of others. I had fought too hard to build the life I had, and I wasn't about to let anyone, especially the man I had loved, take that away from me. And so I took the next step. I filed for divorce and demanded my rightful share of the property. I knew it would be a fight, and I knew Rahul would try to drag me into a war of emotions, but I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I had the confidence to take what was rightfully mine, and I knew I could rebuild my life, with or without him. Rahul's family was furious. His mother, who had once welcomed me with open arms, now turned cold. She threatened to take legal action to challenge my claims, but I stood firm. I wasn't going to be intimidated. They had taken advantage of my kindness for too long, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. As the days passed, Rahul came to realize that I wasn't going to back down. His initial anger began to fade, replaced by regret. He tried apologizing again, his words filled with desperation. "I never meant for things to get this bad, Elena," he said, his eyes filled with guilt. "Please don't leave me. I'm sorry for everything." But it was too late. The damage had been done. I had already made my decision, and nothing he could say would change it. The woman I was now, strong, confident, and unapologetic, would not return to the life of submission and sacrifice that I had once known. I had taken control of my life, and in doing so, I had found my true strength. As I walked away from the life I had once known, I was no longer the woman who was afraid to stand up for herself. I was a woman who knew her worth, a woman who had found the courage to take her power back. And in that moment, I realized that the victory wasn't in the divorce or the property. It was in the fact that I had finally chosen myself. I had finally chosen to put my happiness, my self-respect, and my future first. The weeks that followed my decision were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and challenges. I knew that taking control of my life meant facing difficult truths, but I was resolute. Rahul tried to apologize repeatedly, his messages filled with promises of change, but I could see the pattern clearly now. His apologies, like everything else, were motivated by convenience, by the fear of losing the lifestyle and the money that I had been providing for him and his family. I wasn't fooled anymore. This wasn't about love. It was about control, and I had taken that power back. I spent the next few days focusing on myself, on healing, on rebuilding. I started to rediscover the woman I had been before all of this, the woman who had dreams, aspirations, and ambitions that weren't tied to anyone else's expectations. I had always been more than just a wife, more than just a source of wealth for someone else. I was a successful, independent woman in my own right, and it was time to embrace that fully. During this time, Rahul reached out to me, but his approach was different. He no longer tried to bargain with me emotionally. He had finally realized that I wasn't going to return to the role of the complacent wife who would simply forgive and forget. He came to me one last time with no demands, no promises. "I'm sorry, Elena," he said, his voice softer now. "I never understood what I was doing to you until it was too late. I was wrong, and I wish I could take it all back." But even in his apology, I saw the cracks. I saw the realization that this wasn't just about me. It was about him, his own inadequacies, and the realization that I was no longer the woman who would tolerate disrespect, no matter how much he loved me. "I've heard your apologies," I said calmly, "and I've accepted them. But the truth is, Rahul, love isn't just about words. It's about actions. You never treated me as an equal. You took advantage of my success, and now you want to make things right because you're afraid of losing everything." I watched as the weight of my words sank in. It wasn't about the property or the money anymore. I wasn't fighting for material wealth. I was fighting for my self-respect, my dignity, and that no amount of wealth could ever replace. "You know what, Rahul?" I continued, standing tall in front of him. "This is my victory. Not because I'm taking property or money, but because I'm taking back my life. I'm taking back my confidence, my happiness, and my future. That's what you never understood. You thought you could buy my love, my loyalty. But it doesn't work that way." I saw a mixture of guilt and understanding in his eyes, but I wasn't moved. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. It was about me taking back my power. In the days that followed, I began the process of finalizing the divorce. I made sure that everything was done legally, ensuring that I received what was rightfully mine, both the property and the respect I had always deserved. The family tried to intervene once more, offering half-hearted apologies and blaming Rahul for everything, but by then I had learned one thing: actions speak louder than words. I didn't want their apologies anymore. I didn't want their pity or their guilt. I wanted to be free, and I wanted to be respected. As the divorce proceedings went on, I started to rebuild my life in a way that was true to myself. I immersed myself in my career, focusing on the projects that had always sparked passion in me but that I had neglected. I began to travel, meeting new people, exploring new opportunities, and creating a life that was filled with purpose and joy. Slowly, I started to realize that the freedom I had gained wasn't just from the divorce. It was from all the fears and doubts that had once held me back. I was no longer bound by the need to please others, to prove myself to anyone. And as time went on, I flourished. I grew my business further, expanding my network and investing in new ventures. My confidence soared as I saw the fruits of my labor, not just in financial success, but in the way I carried myself and the way others treated me. I became known not just as a successful businesswoman, but as someone who had the courage to stand up for herself, to refuse to be taken advantage of, and to build a life on her own terms. One day, as I was reviewing new investment opportunities, I received a call from Rahul. Had been months since we last spoke. His voice was different this time, more humble, quieter. "Elena," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I know you're doing well, and I'm glad to see that you've found peace. I just wanted to say, I respect you. I always should have." I didn't need his validation, but hearing it meant something. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about knowing that I had done what was best for me, and that I had emerged victorious, not just in the legal sense but in my own heart. "Thank you," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I appreciate that. But I've moved on, Rahul. I've found my peace, and I don't need anything from you now." And I meant it. I had found everything I needed within myself. I was free, confident, and stronger than ever. My journey was far from over, but I knew now that I was the author of my own story. No one else had the power to write my future. Only I did. And with that realization, I knew that my true victory wasn't just in standing up for myself. It was in taking control of my life, my choices, and my happiness. As the months passed, I continued to move forward, focusing on my personal and professional growth. The journey I had embarked on wasn't an easy one, but it was one I had to take. And each step felt like a triumph, a reaffirmation that I had made the right choice in standing up for myself. I didn't just rebuild my wealth. I rebuilt my spirit, my self-worth, and my sense of purpose. I immersed myself in my work and began traveling to new places, exploring new business ventures, and making new connections. My confidence grew with every passing day, and it was evident in the way I carried myself. No longer burdened by the weight of others' expectations, no longer worried about proving my worth to anyone. I was living for myself now, and that was the most freeing feeling I had ever experienced. One evening, I hosted a business event at a luxurious venue. It was a celebration of my latest accomplishments, a culmination of the work I had put into expanding my brand and network. The event was filled with powerful, influential people, and as I stood at the center of the room, greeting guests and making deals, I felt a sense of pride I had never known before. The woman who had once been afraid, who had allowed herself to be controlled, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built something of her own, who had taken back her life and her dignity. As I mingled with the guests, a familiar face caught my eye. Rahul had arrived, looking uncharacteristically distant. He stood at the edge of the crowd, watching me with a mixture of admiration and regret. I hadn't expected him to show up, but there he was, his presence impossible to ignore. He made his way toward me, and as he approached, I could see the weight of everything he had gone through since our divorce. His expression was one of quiet reflection. "Elena," he said, his voice softer than it had ever been. "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. What you've achieved, how you've handled everything. I never realized before how strong you were. You've done what I couldn't. You've built a life on your own, and that's something to admire." I studied him for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. There was no longer any anger or resentment, just a quiet understanding. "Thank you, Rahul," I replied, my voice steady and calm. "But I didn't do it for anyone else. I did it for me. I'm not the person I was when we were together, and I've learned to trust myself, to value myself. And that's something I would never have found if I hadn't walked away." He nodded, his eyes filled with genuine admiration. "I understand now," he said quietly. "And I respect that. I'm sorry for everything." In that moment, I realized that the apology wasn't for me anymore. It was for him. He had finally understood the lesson I had learned long ago. That love is about respect, and true love cannot thrive on selfishness or manipulation. He had come to terms with his own mistakes, and that, in a way, was a victory for both of us. But I didn't need his validation. I had found something far greater in the process: my own worth. I had learned that my happiness, my peace of mind, and my success were all in my hands, and no one, not even someone I had once loved, could take that away from me. As the evening progressed, I found myself reflecting on the path I had taken. The challenges, the struggles, the doubts, they had all led to this moment of clarity. I had taken control of my destiny, and I had proven to myself that I was capable of so much more than I had ever believed. The night ended with a sense of closure. Rahul and I exchanged a few more words, but there was no bitterness, no desire to rekindle what we had once shared. The love we had was now just a distant memory, and I was no longer the woman who would cling to the past. I had outgrown that version of myself. As I stood at the center of the room, surrounded by people who respected me for my achievements, I realized that my victory wasn't just in the business deals or the wealth I had accumulated. It was in the person I had become. I was no longer the woman who had allowed others to define her. I was the woman who had taken charge of her life and built a future on her own terms. And in that moment I knew that I had truly won, not just in the eyes of the world but in my own eyes. I was free. Free from the expectations, the guilt, and the manipulation. I had proven to myself that no matter what life threw at me, I could rise above it. I was no longer defined by my past, my marriage, or anyone else's opinions. I was defined by my strength, my courage, and the unwavering belief that I was worthy of everything I had fought for. And as I looked around at the people who had come to support me, who had witnessed my journey, I realized that the true victory was this. I had learned to love myself in a way that no one else could, and that was a power no one could ever take away from me. As I moved forward in my life, the echoes of the past began to fade into the distance, replaced by the steady rhythm of my new, independent existence. I had reclaimed control, not only over my finances but over my emotions, my choices, and my future. I realized that every decision I made, every action I took, was an affirmation of my strength. I was no longer a bystander in my own life, hoping for change to come from others. I was the architect of my own destiny, and that realization brought me an immense sense of peace. Months went by, and with each passing day, I grew more confident. I surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I truly was, who saw the strength, the intelligence, and the vision that had always been within me. My business continued to thrive, and my personal life flourished in ways I hadn't expected. I found joy in the little things again, in the moments of stillness, in the quiet confidence that came from knowing I had weathered the storm and emerged stronger than ever. But one of the most profound changes I experienced was in my relationship with myself. Before, I had lived in constant fear of being judged, of being seen as selfish or arrogant for standing up for my own needs. But now, I embraced those qualities that had once been deemed flaws. I embraced my ambition, my self-respect, and the unwavering belief in my worth. I had stopped living for others and started living for me, and that was the most empowering transformation of all. One evening, as I sat alone in my penthouse, reflecting on the journey I had undertaken, I received a call from an unexpected source. Rahul. My heart didn't race when I saw his name on the screen. I had moved past the hurt, the disappointment, and the anger. It was just another call, another piece of the past that had come knocking. I picked up the phone, curious but composed. "Elena." Rahul's voice came through, soft and sincere. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I wanted to tell you something. I know we've been through a lot and I hurt you, but I see now what you were trying to teach me. You've shown me what it means to stand up for yourself, to not let anyone take advantage of you, no matter what." There was no manipulation in his words now. There was no desperation, no attempt to sway me. It was just the truth, raw and unfiltered. "I'm proud of you," he continued. "I admire what you've become, and I hope in time you can forgive me for what I did. I'll always wish the best for you." I listened in silence, taking in the words that I had once longed to hear. And for a moment I felt a sense of release, a weight lifting off my shoulders. I didn't need him to apologize for me to move on, but hearing it felt like a final chapter in a book I had already closed. "Thank you, Rahul," I said, my voice steady. "But I've already forgiven you. I've forgiven myself too." We exchanged a few more words, and then the call ended. It was as if a door had been quietly closed behind me, the final part of my past now in the rearview mirror. And I didn't look back. The truth was, I didn't need Rahul's forgiveness or his validation. I had already given it to myself. I had moved on not just from the marriage but from the person I had once been, Someone who had feared losing love, who had clung to a relationship out of a need for approval, not knowing that the love I needed the most was my own. As the months turned into years, I built a life that I could be proud of. My business reached new heights, and I was respected not just for my wealth, but for my character. I became known as a woman who had taken the hard road, but one who had done so with grace and strength. My reputation as a businesswoman grew, and my personal life flourished as well. I built new relationships, friendships based on trust and mutual respect. I even found love again, but this time it was different. It wasn't based on dependence or manipulation. It was based on mutual respect, admiration, and the understanding that I could stand on my own, with or without anyone else. In the end, I realized that my true victory was not about the wealth or the property I had gained, nor was it about the apologies or the regrets of others. It was about the woman I had become, a woman who had learned to trust herself, to embrace her power, and to never settle for anything less than what she deserved. And when I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see a woman who had been taken advantage of or betrayed. I saw a woman who had fought for her freedom, her dignity, and her happiness. I saw a woman who had taken back control of her life, who had turned her pain into power, and who had emerged victorious, stronger and more confident than ever before. The real victory was this. I had learned to love myself, to trust myself, and to build